A lot of taxi cabs.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Joines, Mayor of Winston-Salem, and I call to order this February 6th meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council, and would ask those handling the city clerk duties tonight to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Larson.
Present.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Mundy.
Present.
Councilmember Scipio.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Present.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Here.
Councilmember Burke.
Here.
Thank you very much. Would you please join the City Council and me in a moment of silence? Thank you so much. And would you join the City Council and me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I recognize our Sergeant at Arms tonight, Lieutenant J.J. Thompson. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us tonight. Tonight's agenda of the City Council is comprised of the following. We have ordinances renewing certificates of public convenience and necessity. We have two UDO, that's our development ordinance amendments, 3 demolition ordinances. There's a resolution supporting the eligibility of a National Register for Historic Places, approval of an economic development loan. There are 5 zoning petitions and appointments and reappointments to various boards and commissions. That sounds a lot, council members. Several of these items are listed as public hearings. When these public hearings are called, persons in the council chamber will be given an opportunity to speak. If no one wishes to speak, I'll close the public hearing and the council will consider the item. If there is opposition to the zoning petitions, the proponents and the opponents will each be given 15 minutes for presentation and 3 minutes for rebuttal. If no one wishes to speak, again, I'll close the public hearing and the council will consider the item. We're televising this meeting live tonight on TV 13, and it will be replayed tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. and again tomorrow night at 9:00 p.m. Of course, copies of our agendas as well as videos of previous meetings are always available online on the city's website. You just click on Watch Meeting Online option. So, may we go to item Z1, please.
Item Z1, second reading on ordinances renewing the certificates of public convenience and necessity for 5 limousine companies, 2 taxi cab companies, and 1 trolley pub company in the city of Winston-Salem, recommended by Public Safety Committee.
Thank you. I would recognize the Chairman of the Public Safety Committee, Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, I move for approval of item Z1.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor, please vote yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. That's unanimous. Thank you. Item Z2.
Item Z2, public hearing on ordinance authorizing the issuance of a certificate of public convenience and necessity to Royal Transportation for the operation of 1 limousine in the city of Winston-Salem, recommended by Public Safety Committee.
Councilmember Taylor.
I move for approval of item Z2.
Wait a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Not all those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no.
Excuse me, Mayor,
Yes, I'm sorry.
if we could open the public hearing.
Well, there's a public hearing on this one. Thank you, Mr. Abrams. This is a public hearing on a new issuance of a certificate of public convenience. Is there anyone in the council chamber who would like to be heard on this item of certificate of public convenience to Royal Transportation? All right, so you know when I will close the public hearing then, and then we will vote on this item. Anyone in favor, vote yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that's unanimous. Thank you. And Z3?
Item Z3, public hearing on ordinance authorizing the issuance of a certificate of public convenience and necessity to Morris Transportation Services, LLC, for the operation of 2 limousines in the city of Winston-Salem, recommended by Public Safety Committee.
Thank you. This is a public hearing for Morris Transportation Services. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this item? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and recognize Councilmember Taylor.
I move for approval of item Z3.
Second.
Motion second. In discussion? All those in favor of the item, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. Thank you, that's unanimous. Item Z4.
Item Z4, public hearing on ordinance authorizing the issuance of a certificate of public convenience and necessity to Allegiance Transportation, LLC, for the operation of 10 limousines in the city of Winston-Salem, recommended by Public Safety Committee.
Is this a public hearing? Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this item related to Allegiance Transportation? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed and recognize Councilmember Taylor.
I move for approval of item Z4.
Second. Motion is second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item Z5.
Item Z5, public hearing on ordinance authorizing the issuance of certificate of public convenience and necessity to Elder Up for the operation of 3 limousines in the city of Winston-Salem, recommended by Public Safety Committee.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this item for the 3 limousines for, see the name of it there, Elder? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed and again recognize Councilmember Taylor.
I move for approval of item Z5.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the item, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Taylor. Worked
Thank
too
you.
hard there for a while. Item Z6.
Item Z6, public hearing on ordinance amending Chapter 3 of the Unified Development Ordinances to add that the first bottom layer of asphalt be installed and approved in subdivision streets prior to acceptance of surety for remaining infrastructure improvements and final plat recordation, recommended by the Public Works Committee.
Mr. Murphy, could you give us just a brief comment on this? I realize it's just codifying what we've generally been doing for a long time there.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Yes, this is a text amendment, again, as was stated, to require that the first and bottom layer of asphalt be in place prior to surety for the outstanding other improvements and prior to the issuance of the final plat. This is something that we have been doing. It was codified in the ordinance probably 15 years ago, but the wording was less than clear. It has been our practice that this is what has to happen. We have had some developers who have come from out of town and are wanting to ask, say the ordinance doesn't say this, why do we have to do it? So we worked with engineering to clarify that. It basically codifies existing city policy to reduce potential developer confusion. And it has been the policy for several years. This amendment was presented to the Quarterly Development Forum back at our September meeting. Wes Kimbrell with engineering was there to discuss it. We did not have any questions or concerns articulated at that meeting. Following that meeting, we also sent the same group a copy of the ordinance, asked them if they had any concerns to get back with us. Again, we heard no concerns with the change. Public hearing was held at the December 8th, 2022 Planning Board meeting. There was no opposition, and Planning Board did vote unanimously to recommend it to council. It did go to Public Works in January, and it was unanimously recommended to full council. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Murphy? Great. Well, thank you. This is a public hearing. Has anyone in the council chamber would like to be heard on this proposed change to the Unified Development Ordinance? Seeing no one, I declare the public hearing closed. I'll recognize the Chairman of the Public Works Committee, Councilmember McIntosh.
I move for approval of 1, the statement of consistency for approval of this item, and 2, UDO-CC20.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Councilor McIntosh. Item Z7.
Item Z7, public hearing on ordinance amending Chapter 9 of the Unified Development Ordinances to increase parking flexibility for restaurant uses in older nonconforming buildings within the city's urban neighborhoods, recommended by Community Development, Housing, General Government Committee on December 13, 2022.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy, if you would, quick one on this one as well.
Good evening again. Yes, this goes back to a change that we made in the ordinance back in 2006. It was UDO 160, and that was approved to provide greater flexibility for changes of use in older commercial buildings, older non-residential buildings. Those provisions allowed changes of use to occur in buildings constructed prior to 1988 in the city without having to meet current parking requirements. There was a carve-out that was made, and that was for restaurants. There was concern that given the need for the number of parking spaces that was needed, that we needed to not provide that exception to them as a by right exception, but they could apply for what's called an elected body special use permit and come to the council and ask for that parking waiver. Over the course of time, there have been 7 special use permits that have come to city council, 4 in the last 2.5 years. None of those 7 have had any opposition, and all 7 were approved by the council. So in order for us to kind of streamline the process, make it easier and more understandable, staff feels like the best thing to do, since we haven't had any issues with these parking waiver requests, is to allow the restaurant uses to have the same exceptions that the other buildings built prior to 1988 enjoy within GMAs 1 and 2, so the downtown area and the urban neighborhoods area, and that's what this text amendment does. It was heard by the planning board at their November 10th, 2022 public hearing. There were no speakers in opposition. Planning board did vote 8-1 to recommend approval of this request. There was 1 dissent. It was heard by Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee at their December 13th committee meeting, and received a unanimous recommendation to the full council. And with that, I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
Questions of Mr. Murphy? Mr. Larson.
Of those 7 restaurants that have received the approval, how many of those actually opened?
I'm not 100% sure on that. I would say probably 4 or 5 of them at least.
Actually, so the tests that we've run is not complete, really, is it, yet?
Well, again, it's based on the sample size that we do have, which is 7. Of course, keep in mind that there are other intense uses that have intense parking requirements that also enjoy the waiver, such as can't think of exactly what we called them, where Joy Mongers is, and some uses like that have had parking waivers that have been fairly intense, and we haven't had any real issues with spillover into neighborhoods as well for those type of uses.
Is there any incentive for a restaurant owner to actually build a parking lot rather than just assume that they can use this provision and not actually expend any money on construction? I know it says if there's one in place, they have to leave the parking in place, but there's no requirement that they expand their parking lots.
There is no requirement, but keep in mind, the Unified Development Ordinance is only one piece of the puzzle. If they have financing, if there are things that they're going through the bank, there may be pro forma requirements that would dictate that they have to provide some type of parking or have some type of parking agreement for money to be landed on a restaurant. Now, if someone just has the money and they have the capital and they want to do a restaurant use and they don't need to go through a bank, there's not any other requirement, but there are some other safeguards in place. And keep in mind, we're only talking GMAs 1 and 2, so we're talking about the areas that are theoretically walkable, that already have intense commercial and mixed use areas developed.
But it does provide a use for historic buildings to be reused, which I think is important.
It does. It allows for ease of adaptive reuse, and it kind of levels the playing field for the use restaurant versus the other uses that already have enjoyed that for the last 15 or 16 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this proposed UDO text amendment? All right. I'll close the public hearing, and this did come from your committee, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I move for approval of 1, statement of consistency for approval of this item, and 2, UDO CC 19.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Item Z8.
Item Z8, public hearing on ordinance ordering the demolition and removal of a structure 1409 North Liberty Street located in the Northeast Ward, recommended by Community Development and Housing General Government Committee.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this proposed demolition? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And again, this came out of Community Council. Mayor Pro Tem.
Move for approval of item Z8.
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion, questions? All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Scipio.
thank you. I'd like to have a few comments about this demolition and the other two that are following it, to my colleagues. These buildings are the last remaining structures in the African American community that were for commercial use, owned and operated for blacks. I actually understand the fact that they have decayed dramatically. However, we are a community that celebrates preservation. I don't believe that we've really investigated whether these buildings can be preserved and what that would cost. But they are the last vestiges of black commercial enterprises, original buildings owned by African Americans. We have no other buildings in a commercial district like these. It saddens me that we find it prudent to demolish structures and not to try to save them. And I know they're in really bad shape. However, buildings can be restored. And I just wonder if we are sincere about preserving African American heritage in this city. We often demolish homes because the people are poor and they can't take care of their property. And so we expediently demolish houses. But we are very aggressive about preserving other structures in other neighborhoods. We've considered the Neeson Wagon Works property for procurement and revitalization. It may not be in this state, but these buildings possibly could be preserved. I would like to have a substitute motion that we keep this in committee for 3 months while we investigate the cost of restoring these buildings and repurposing them. And if after 3 months it's cost prohibitive, then we would go to demolish them. It just saddens me that we would automatically just demolish our black community as it happened years ago with urban renewal. So I make that motion.
Okay. Councilmember Scipio offers a substitute motion to delay this item, hold it in committee for 3 months. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Councilmember Larson seconds the motion.
Can we discuss just a bit?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Councilmember.
This is in the Northeast Ward?
Yes.
Is that right? Can I just get any information on whether there have been any studies that might inform us on the validity, the possibility of restoring these buildings?
Mr. Murphy's got, I believe, some photos.
Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. This is something that came to our attention as a result of someone was actually living in the vestibule of this top image at 1409. Someone was living in that vestibule because they had lost their place of residence and they were living in that vestibule. They had their belongings out along the road. Police, I believe, was instrumental in getting some helping to relocate that person to another location. But it brought to our attention, we were concerned that someone was in this building, and so we got an administrative search warrant because we were scared of the conditions from the building from an external observation. And I will show you quickly all three, but this is the outside of 1409 North Liberty. This is just a representative sample of the condition of this building. You see the roof system has collapsed within it. Whenever you see the daylight of that second image, that's where the roof has collapsed. That's just not where there are skylights. The skylight has fallen out of the roof and is on the ground. We ran into, there have been folks that have been illegally in these buildings and doing drugs and other things. This particular building was flea-ridden. This particular building has a current tax value of approximately $45,000, and that's including the land. The tax office estimate to reconstruct this building is $350,000 to reconstruct it. And that's similar to both Z9, which is 1411 North Liberty. Again, you see the images there, and 1415, 1417, and 1419 North Liberty, where, again, massive amounts of internal issues. You have structural issues with the roof, the floor, the steps. You have cracking foundations. Without the intervening floor and roof, you have the potential that the walls have shifted within these buildings. So again, it really is an unsafe situation. The cost to reconstruct these, again, based on tax office estimates, you're looking at, generally speaking, it's 10 times, just a quick analysis, 10 times the tax value is what it would cost to reconstruct these structures. Per city code and per the North Carolina general statutes, when we saw these buildings, the condition of these buildings, we actually sent notices to the property owners, held public hearings. We were able to, and Deputy City Attorney Contos was part of those along with Jamie Rowe on our staff. We actually had folks in there that own the buildings, and basically they understand the conditions of the buildings and have chosen, following those hearings, we actually issued them a demolition order that they could appeal, or they could demolish within a certain period of time, or we bring it to council to order a demolition. They have chosen to have it come to council because it's my understanding that they don't even want to pay the cost to demolish the building. They want the city to demolish it and then assess the property so they can pay for the demolition over time. So, obviously it's council's prerogative related to how you would like to handle these, but of course it would be up to the property owner to come up with the money to bring these buildings up to current standards. The city doesn't own these, and I don't know that the city would have the funds to purchase and then renovate these. So obviously it's up to it's a council decision on what you want to do, but related to the question that was asked, it would be a substantial amount of money to bring these buildings back up to a safe standard, much less a standard where they could be used.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Did that cover
Yes,
Mr.
it
Mundy?
does. Thank you.
Councilor Larson?
How do these buildings get into this kind of condition? It's obviously looks like years of neglect and deterioration. And
I'm not sure when the last time these buildings were occupied, but they haven't been occupied for a long time. And obviously, as buildings aren't occupied, you don't have they're not conditioned, and whenever spaces become unconditioned, you get situations like this where the buildings rapidly deteriorate. But I would say it's been at least 10 or 15 years since these buildings.
We don't have anybody from the city fire department or anybody looking at these buildings periodically.
Again, that's beyond me. I know that we have annual inspections for occupied buildings. I don't believe we have annual inspections for unoccupied buildings.
Well, it's a shame that we've lost the buildings because of neglect over years and years and years, and now it looks like we're going to lose them entirely. So it'd be nice to have a better system of catching them earlier and trying to enforce code requirements earlier, if possible. I don't know how we do that, but it seems to me if we're going to try to avoid these sorts of situations where we lose buildings because we haven't paid attention to them over years, and demolition by neglect, I think, is the term that's used. And here in this case, we definitely got demolition.
And keep in mind, we do have a program that does do that for residential structures, but we don't currently have a minimum commercial structure set of ordinances in the city code that requires inspections and requires buildings to be kept up to a minimum standard. We handle things through a permitting aspect, but there's not any type of program that monitors existing buildings for their conditions.
Maybe that's something council could look at in the future.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Murphy. Ms. McCullough, do we know the ages of these buildings anywhere around the time? I know growing up, walking to Kennedy and Atkins and Liberty Street had the Dungeon nightclub, the Cleaners, Paris, all of that. But to your point, Councilmember Larson, when a community has been left for decades of disinvestment, this is what you get. This is just not urban renewal. This is a community that never got the investment that the other sides of town got. And to think that our communities, if we leave certain structures because of their age, yes, and historical value, then this street, which is supposed to be a gateway from the south to the north, Liberty Street, when you get past the Kentucky Fried Chicken and heading towards downtown, it's a whole different Liberty Street. Liberty Street, from the moment you get to Patterson, all the way up to the airport, this is what we got. Again, it wasn't because of the community. It was just the fact of the systems in place that disinvested our community. Again, thank you, Ms. McCullough. The ages.
1910, 1930, 1940. So you're talking about early 19th century.
Absolutely great.
And in its day, they were in their heyday.
Yes, they were. Thank you very much. Again, when we are trying to redevelop, rebuild our communities across this country, there are probably thousands of buildings that have to come down if we're going to change the way our communities look. You know, we all hate it, but think of the people that live in that community, and we're building Choice Neighborhood, millions and millions of dollars down the street to put in commercial stores, decrease the crime, the violence, all of it. You know, I hate it just as much as the next person because I lived on this street growing up in Winston. And with that, you know, I will be supporting this because the council member has plans, the community has plans, and they have spoken as to what they want their community to look like as we move forward.
Mr. McIntosh?
I was just going to throw out quickly, I think the estimate to rebuild or to redo these places is way, way, way low. I think you're probably looking at $200 a square foot, if not more, and at 4,000 square feet, you're getting close in on $1 million. And while I think everybody knows I've done a lot of restoration work, there has to be some fiscal reality involved, and I don't think you ever get back close to $1 million anytime soon until lots of other positive things happen in the neighborhood. And I don't think it's fair to the neighbors to have to live with these in the condition they're in until the neighborhood comes that far back around.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Scipio.
I just, sometimes you can't put the price on culture. I know we want to deal with dollars and cents, but I just ask you to give me 3 months to figure out if I can find money to restore this building. That's all I'm asking. If you want to tear it down because you want something new, fine. To me, this is the last part of my history that I can visually see. Anything else that used to exist in East Winston is gone. So that's all I'm asking. 3 months to see if that can be restored, if it's possible. I know it's not my ward, it's Ms. Burke's ward. And I know we'll go with whatever she believes, but I'm just asking for that time.
Councilmember Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot has been said, but a lot has also been done. Starting in 2020, and some of our city managers and our city manager, Garrity, can tell you, I spent a lot of time walking up and down Liberty Street. This is my community. I've been here my entire life. I can tell you about every structure, every black business that existed on Liberty Street, so I care with a deep passion, and I can speak about it that way as well. When I walked up and down Liberty Street with Mr. Rao, Mr. Millett, and my assistant, we engaged with many community members and business owners on Liberty Street, and those that we were not able to engage with, we sent letters. I made phone calls. I talked to the owners of these properties, and I asked them if they had an interest in rehabbing their properties. Mr. Millett, because he is the head of our business department, he made it his business, because I asked him to connect them to business opportunities that could be taken advantage of as far as city funds to rehab their businesses. They had no interest. Now, let's fast forward. Later on, I found out, because many of us that drive up and down Liberty Street on a regular basis, that we had many of our homeless residents living on the sidewalk in front of these structures. And when I say living, I do mean a couch. Chief Weaver, he went there day after day after day to try to assist one of our citizens who was living on the street. Table, chairs, couch, wheelchair. We had people living inside these structures, and once we started to help the homeless in this area, we realized the condition inside these structures. We realized that the walls were caving in, that the ceilings were coming down. We realized that people had been taking up residence on the inside. We also realized a lot of illegal activities had taken place. So this has become an attractive nuisance for crime and for other behaviors that are illegal and prohibited. More importantly, it is unsafe. It is unsafe for our citizens. And the property owners are not in disagreement with demolishing these buildings, and I am not in disagreement with it either. I think that we do need to understand what Mayor Pro Tem said. For years, we've had disinvestment in this area. For years, we have looked at and seen and witnessed the neglect. Well, I am going to do something about it for the time that I am on this council. And again, this is not what the property owners want, so we're going to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Burke. I think we do need to keep in mind that the city has invested quite a bit of money on this street already with our Liberty Street redevelopment efforts. City manager, I think it's $3.5 million, one of the programs there. And we had the Liberty CDC in that area, so there's been some attention by the city on this area there, but I can certainly see Councilmember Burke's position on this, but she's going to do some other things with it there. Councilmember Larson, you had a point.
Yes, just one last comment. This is an example of where lack of knowledge is now coming back to haunt us. And I hope that in the future, as we look at African-American resources in this community, that we will begin to get a preservation program that will get ahead of the curve on the demolition of these. There are other options available. For example, some communities have chosen to at least preserve the front facades of buildings and build back behind them so that the character of the streetscape has remained historic. And I would hope that we'd look at various options as we go through time to try to preserve the built environment of the African-American culture that's so important to this community.
Thank you, Councilman. We have a substitute motion. Oh, well, Councilman Mundy, excuse me.
Well, let's vote first and then.
All right, okay. We do have a substitute motion to keep this in committee for 3 months, and we do have a second to that motion. So the motion you're voting would be yes would be to approve the holding in committee, no would be against the substitute motion and allow it to go forward for a vote on the original motion. Understand?
Yes.
So there are 6 noes and 2 yeses, so the substitute motion fails. Councilman Scipio, we're back to the original motion to approve this. And Councilman Mundy, do you want to comment before we vote?
I think that I just want to plant a seed that we do something in the way of a historic marker to memorialize, to a pictorial display, something that can commemorate where these last 3 buildings were. It's not the same as having the buildings there, but I do feel the pain of losing the last vestiges of some stores and commercial buildings that people who grew up in those neighborhoods would remember. So if there's some way to recall them and memorialize them, I think that would be a good thing to do without having to spend as much money as we would to rehab.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Mundy. We're back to the original motion to approve the demolition of the house there, or the building, excuse me, at 1409 North Liberty Street. All those in favor of that motion would vote yes, and anyone opposed would vote no.
We didn't do the motion.
We don't have the motion. You made the
Oh,
motion.
sorry. Look, you lost me and all.
Read the motion.
She did.
Is it coming up?
It's not coming up.
We had 2 votes on this item. It may have messed up our system.
Here we go.
You want us to vote manually on this one? It's coming. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, it's up. Okay, thank you.
Excuse me,
Councilman Burke.
I need to read the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
No.
We have a motion.
I think we're
Yeah,
good.
Dee Dee made a
Okay.
motion.
Yeah, Councilman
made the motion.
Councilman Adams made
Of safety hazard or to be dangerous to the life, health, or other property. I further move that City Council ordered that the building at 1417 and 14.
Correct, or maybe should ask Mr. Contos that question. Or
Say, I would defer to Deputy City Attorney Contos on that. I'm not 100% sure. I think it gives us the ability to.
gonna
I
have
believe
some
there's
there.
a special.
Ways to ensure that the history of the buildings and communities are there, that people will see them on murals or boards or whatever, that they just don't go into the night and nobody remembers anything. Example, Fairview Park and some other places, Kimberly Park tennis courts, so definitely this will be part of when the rehab and the rebuilding of Liberty within the East Northeast Ward is done, that every block is memorialized historically, so people will know that these places and families existed. They existed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, Mr. Manager, we can take that and run with it with make sure it doesn't, as Councilman Mundy mentioned, it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Thank you. Item Z11.
Item Z11, public hearing on resolution supporting the eligibility of property for the National Register of Historic Places, the Alexander S. and Mary R. Haynes House.
Ms. McCullough, would you give us a brief summary of the proposed action tonight?
Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Council, thank you for allowing me to join you this evening. As you know, because we are in the city of Winston-Salem, we're what's called a certified local government. You get the honor to actually look at properties that are being brought before the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So tonight we're going to be looking at the Alexander S. and Mary R. Haynes House, which has been brought to the State Historic Preservation Office for listing. This is a photograph of the house. I'm going to be very brief because I know you have a very long schedule tonight. Here is an aerial view of that house and some of the other features on it. There are the rock retaining walls, which were craftsmen of our African-American craftsmen in our community. So that's one also part of this designation, and some other structures. Just to get you an idea, it's off Renolda Road and Buena Vista Road on the corner on North Hawthorne Road. The criteria for listing on the National Register is twofold. It is significance and is integrity. This structure is being listed because of its architectural significance. It is a Charles Barton Keene house that was erected by the McNeil Construction Company. It's a Georgian Revival style home that exterior and interior wise holds most of its original features. You did review this several months ago for our landmark program. Its period of significance is its construction in 1923, and it does hold the 7 features of integrity that it's required. This was sent to us in December and went to the Historic Resource Commission at their January 4th meeting. They recommend that it be listed on the National Register, and they brought it to the General Government Committee, which we then held the announcement of the public hearing for tonight's meeting, and it will go to the National Register Advisory Committee on February 9th, which is this week. Any questions?
So any questions? This is different, obviously, than creating a local designation, which would give half the tax value. So this is just to our comments on going to the National Register.
The National Register is an honorific nomination, so there are no tax incentives unless they choose to go for the Rehabilitation Tax Credit Program, and that's on projects. That is not like a deferral, which is in perpetuity with the project. So again, there are no monetary carrots, as I like to say, for these properties listing at this level.
Councilor McIntosh.
And even if they were to choose to pursue those tax credits, those tax credits come from a federal level, not from a local level.
Correct. They come from a state and a federal level, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCullough. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the council chamber who wishes to be heard on this proposed resolution supporting the eligibility of this property? All right. Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed and would recognize Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Burke. Spirit. Mayor, members of the council, I move that we approve item Z11.
Second.
Motion second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Item Z12.
Item Z12, public hearing on items relating to an economic development loan to Front Street Capital.
Thank you. We've discussed this item before in Finance Committee, and we had to delay it because we need to hold a public hearing. Mr. Rao, you're going to make a couple brief introductory comments on this. Mr. Millett is, I understand, not able to be here tonight.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, members of the City Council. So this item was considered by Finance Committee last month and recommended for approval. Front Street Capital is a Winston-Salem-based developer of commercial real estate, including industrial, office, healthcare, and mixed-use properties throughout the Southeast. They have requested a loan of $2.5 million to assist in the construction of a 144,000 square foot speculative building on lot number 4 at Union Cross Industrial Center. The initial investment could total approximately $15.7 million. Part of the terms of this loan would be that they would have to repay it within 5 years. The loan would be repaid in full upon the occupation of the facility by a tenant and the subsequent selling or refinancing of the facility. The city has partnered with Front Street Capital in 2 other developments. In 2020, the city loaned $2.5 million for the development of a 250,000 square foot speculative building at the park at 74 Industrial Park. As part of that loan, the terms were that they could pay it within 5 years this was 2020 when you all approved it, they repaid the loan in full last month. So basically, this item is reloaning the proceeds from that repayment. I have to answer any questions.
Mr. Rao? All right. Mayor Pro Tem.
Ms. Rao, could you put up the presentation of the aerial of the buildings that have already located there and the location for this? And could you make it so we could see the audience in the TV audience, exhibits 1 and 2? Councilmember Taylor has grown a nice infrastructure over there on the southeast side of his ward. And I think it's very important that people see all of the buildings and businesses that have located there in the past few years. Isn't Pepsi a part of this as well?
Yep.
When you see when you see the aerial, there are more businesses there than the ones that you're going to see. I think you might need to go back to the first one. Yes, that's it. And could you tell us which building was it, the lot that we sold, that they built for us, the first one?
So, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, I'm going to recognize Coleman Team Front Street, let him point that out for you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Team, would you state your name and address for the record, please, Mr. Team?
Good evening, Council. Coleman Team, 450 North Patterson Avenue, Winston-Salem, 27101. Great question. We've done this 3 times now, or requesting to do this 3 times. And the beauty of the process, I'll tell you, so the first spec building we built with the assistance of the city was Southern Carlson. You'll see that right there. Because of the availability of that spec building, we landed the next building, which was Bunzel. Bunzel would not have come but for Southern Carlson being built. What you can't see is just on the other side of 74 was the next spec building we did. That was 250,000 square feet. Because of that availability, we were able to land a 600,000 square foot building for RDOT right across the street. So this to me is a definition of a perfect win-win. You know, we partner with the city to deliver a spec building, but it's ended up generating probably upwards of $175 million in tax base. So we paid each of the loans back in 16 and 19 months respectively. And we fully expect to do the same here. The hard part of our business is you have to take the risk to build empty buildings so that we can keep up with the pace of economic development. So really here to say thanks. I mean, it's a big piece of our community to continue this economic development. Zeal Abeg is a groundbreaking that we have tomorrow where we're creating 189 new jobs. And those are welding jobs that are tech job, coming out of Forsyth Tech, for example, all the way up to executive to hourly, so that we feel like benefiting the full scale of the Winston-Salem community with these projects. Happy to answer any other specific questions.
We should say thank you and Front Street for your investment in this regard. And Councilman, you might recall that the city jumped out front and doing this park, we actually paid for the streets and utilities going in there with an idea that we get paid as it was developed out. And as Mayor Pro Tem rightfully points out, it is done exceedingly well there. So
we closed last week or the week before on the 73 acres that we expect to come right behind this in between Glen High School and Caterpillar. So we're excited about continuing to help the city with our economic development efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Team.
Keep them coming.
Mayor Joynes, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to be heard on this proposed economic development loan to Front Street Capital? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And this did come out of finance. Councilman Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I move for approval of item Z12.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the item, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. That is unanimous. Thank you all very much. Z13.
Item Z13, public hearing on zoning petition of James Howard, Carrie Howard, and Margot Cooper from RS9 and RM12-S to RM12-S. Property is located on the east side of Stafford Place Boulevard, south of Stafford Place Circle, located in the South Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Thank you. I can't tell from this sign-in sheet if there's one person signed up. I can't tell if you're opposed or in opposition or proposed. Mr. Hensley?
Well,
I just want some clarification on it. My name is Ronald Helsley. I live at 3521 Cedar Post Road. I'm a resident there of 37 years. My neighbor, he's been there 40 years, and my other neighbor,
Let me
he's
just
been there
determine, are
20.
you opposed to this rezoning?
What I want some clarification on, Cedar Post Road runs into that property, and I want to make sure that Cedar Post will never be open to that development.
Okay, we'll
Okay?
get to that.
Because it will destroy our neighborhood.
All right, thank you very much. Let me just see if the proponents here tonight proposed, would you like to make a comment, and then we'll get to the opposition if there's any.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. I appreciate all of you coming and hosting these meetings and listening to all of us. My name's Davis Ray with Winfield Properties. We are working with the owners of this property to develop a multifamily community. And the first thing I would say with respect to Cedar Post Road is that is a design requirement. There are some barriers there that would not allow for that connection to happen right now. I may defer to planning and development to explain why that road is showing as access to Cedar Post. But we are also the developer, builder, and management agent for the property adjacent to the subject property that recently obtained the certificates of occupancy. We have a great need in this particular area, and having some familiarity with it, we feel like it's a good opportunity, not only for us, but for the folks in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. So just wanted to make myself available for questions, comments.
Thank you. So as I understand it, you have no plans to make that connection, and Mr. Murphy may comment on why that's not really feasible anyway. So, anyone else for the proponents? All right. So we'll go to the opposition. And Ms. Husley, I know you're not totally opposed to this, but if you'd like to say anything else, we'll go and get the answer to your question in just a minute.
I heard him say, not at this time. I'm concerned that after this meeting that could happen. I'd like to get, and whatever I've got to do to make sure that street is never opened at that end. We have traffic problems now there with excessive speed. That whole development is 25 miles an hour. We've contacted the police department several times to come out there and patrol the area, and it's like nothing happens. And we know if that opens up, traffic is just that's a straight, Cedar Post Road is a very straight street through there. It would be a cut through and just bad for our neighborhood.
Good. Thank you. We'll see if we can get your answer to your question there. All right. You want to, anything in rebuttal for the proponents there? Okay. All right. I'll close the public hearing then. And Mr. Murphy, would you give the report of the planning board, and perhaps you could clarify that particular question?
Good evening again. Feels like I've been up here a lot tonight. This is a request of James Howard, Kerry Howard, and Margot Cooper to rezone a 18.91 acre site on the east side of Stafford Place Boulevard, south of Stafford Place Circle, located in the South Ward, from RM12S and RS9 to RM12S. Here is the subject property shown on the countywide growth management area. It is located within the GMA3 Suburban Neighborhoods Growth Management Area and on the edge of a activity center there at Peters Creek Parkway and Stafford Village Boulevard, where the Walmart and Lowe's and other commercial and multifamily residential projects are located. This is the subject property highlighted in yellow. Again, part of it is zoned RS9, part of it is already zoned RM12S. See the S, that's where the zoning sign was. This is Cedar Post Road, which currently is a stub, but it does not stub into the subject property. There is an intervening property of between 7 and 10 feet wide strip of land that comes in between the residential single-family subdivision and the RM12 and RS9 property that's in for rezoning tonight. Same property outlined in yellow on the countywide aerial photography. Again, you see the developed nature of the property, kind of the activity center where the MRBS is, the surrounding multifamily, and then the RS9 property that the gentleman lives in, that subdivision. This is the subject property shown on the South Suburban Area Plan update. Part of this is recommended for intermediate density multifamily. Part of it is for what's called moderate density attached residential. But the overall density for this subject property is consistent with the recommendation of the area plan. It matches the other multifamily in the area and is in a walkable area which would be able to take advantage of those commercial activities. There is a transit line that runs to the Walmart in that area. So again, it is a very walkable community and a good location for additional density. These are just some images on site. This is looking east on Stafford Village Boulevard. You see the rezoning sign. That's a directional sign saying that the rezoning site is to the south, about 850 feet. This is looking at the rezoning site along Stafford Place Boulevard. The subject property is on the left. And this is looking north at the terminus of Cedar Post Road. Subject property is to the north, again, with a intervening strip of property in between.
How wide is that strip?
7 to 10 feet. I think it varies a little bit. Best guess 7 to 10 feet when we measure it. But again, there hasn't been a survey that's been done on that piece of property. This is the site plan. Again, there are 8 total multifamily buildings along with a pool and clubhouse building. And you see where this is where Stafford Place Boulevard is. This is coming into the subject property. This is the parking lot that serves those 4 buildings north of the single-family residential subdivision. And we do have a stub street that is shown going to that for a public access easement in the future, should the neighborhood desire it, and should the intervening piece of property ever come in for development. So again, there is a public access easement that is shown, but there isn't really a trigger to require that to ever be connected without someone asking for it. If it's up to this, this is one of those situations where we're trying to set up for the future. I understand the concern with interconnectivity and the speeding within the existing subdivision. This would actually get residents within that single-family subdivision back out to another light. They do have a way to get to a light going south where it lines up with Bridgeton Road at the Speedway. But there isn't, that's the only signalized intersection. This would give the ability to have interconnectivity to another subdivision, or excuse me, to another traffic signal. This is just a profile. You see the existing single-family homes. On the left-hand side of this image, you see that 7-foot wide strip. You see the buffer yard that's required. The new buildings are about 100 feet away from that buffer yard, or about 140 feet away from the property line, and probably looking at 200 feet plus from the single-family homes to the multifamily proposed buildings. These are what the buildings would look like. In summary, the proposal does meet the recommendations of the South Suburban Area Plan update and the Legacy 2030 plan. The request provides additional needed housing units at an appropriate location within the serviceable area. The site is located within the Peters Creek Activity Center and has convenient access to multimodal transit and shopping. This was heard by the Planning Board at their January 12, 2023 public hearing, where there were 2 speakers in opposition. The opposition was similar to what you heard tonight about concern about the connection, but they were also had voiced some concerns related to loss of wildlife, impact on property values, and the fact that there was only one access on the south side of Stafford Place Boulevard for all of those multifamily buildings. Following discussion, the planning board did vote unanimously to recommend approval of the request. And so with that, I'm available to answer any questions. If there is a concern about the potential for the future connection, there is a condition of approval that's in your packet under other requirements that reads, dedication of public access easement from the southern stub of Sidesbrook Court to the intersection of Stafford Place Court and Stafford Forest Drive, should a street be made with Cedar Post Road. So again, we've provided that stub connection, and we have an access easement that is required. But if it is a concern of council to address the concerns of the neighborhood, that could be eliminated, as it's not a public street requirement, as we have had in some instances.
Okay.
With that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr. Murphy? Councilmember Scipio.
Mr. Murphy, that little stub that you're saying, is that a requirement that our planning board put on the site design, or was that a consideration that developer put on the site?
That came as a result of discussions with staff in an attempt to try to provide a future relief valve to get folks back up to the intersection, to have interconnectivity where they could more quickly get to the Walmart without having to get on to Peters Creek Parkway. But again, there is no ordinance requirement for that, so that could be eliminated should it be the desire of council.
And that little strip that you said of land, that's another owner?
Correct.
And the likelihood, is it a piece, is it part of a larger parcel?
It is, but that little strip in and of itself wouldn't be able to provide any form of access for them. They would have to get their access from somewhere else because it's just a 7 to 10 foot wide strip.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, Councilmember McIntosh.
Not a question, just a comment. I would like to just draw attention to the quality of the product that the developer builds. There's an example of it up on Stafford Place Drive, and if you drive through and look at it, it's very high quality, very commendable.
Good, thank you. I recognize Councilmember Larson for a motion.
Yes, I'd like to make some comments first, if I could.
We'll get a motion on the floor, Mr. Larson.
I want to modify the site plan.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So it seems to me the discussion really revolves around the Cedar Post Road connection and the viability of putting that in on a 7-foot to 10-foot piece of property that's running right now wedged between the two properties. The 7 to 10-foot property does not really provide access to the larger parcel that belongs to, but it does raise the possibility that it could be sold off separately and that road could be pushed through. And I think that would be extremely detrimental to the neighborhood to the south. So I guess I asked the planning staff as to whether or not we can pull that section of connecting road back at least beyond the 40-foot buffer line without going back to planning board with this.
Councilmember Larson, if it's the wishes of council, you could actually pull the whole thing back and not even have the access easement as a condition of approval. Again, it was more of an attempt to provide a relief valve. If we would prefer to have seen a public street through there, but that didn't make sense given the development of what had already transpired to the north and west. So as a result of that, we were trying to do a public access easement. Again, that would perhaps allow for some future interconnectivity to the subdivision to the south. But again, I believe as you have heard tonight, that's not a desire of that neighborhood. And the way that site plan and condition are configured, you would not be violating the ordinance to do away with those.
My understanding is we've got two zoning parcels here. We got one with RS9 and one with RS12, and we're taking the whole thing and turning it into RS12 right now. And the section that we're really dealing with is RS9, which is being converted to 12, which is, of course, an upgrade. And for the neighborhood that's to the south, I think they had anticipated that if that had been developed, it would have been developed along the lines of what their zoning is, which is RS9. And would have been single-family dwelling houses. So for them, their concern was that, we're now having a different kind of development going to the north. And I can understand their concern that the connecting into into their neighborhood is going to have an adverse impact. And I would make a motion, I suppose, to modify the site plan to remove that connector on the south side there.
So you're moving approval of the zoning, Mr. Larson, with a change in the site plan to pull that.
And I guess we have to have approval of the developer as well to make that happen. You're comfortable with that? Sorry.
Would you state for the record that you would accept that condition, please?
Yes, sir, we would be comfortable removing that. We would actually prefer it not be there.
And Councilmember Larson, if as you're doing that, since we already have him up here, it would also be that we need to eliminate that condition
in the
under other requirements. A, dedication of public access easement from the southern stub. We need to remove that as well.
Remove that as well.
You accept that item as well?
That's part of the proposal.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Contos.
We got the attorney wants to talk.
I believe there's a similar condition on the first page, at the very bottom, paragraph D.
So we just talking about remove it as well.
I'm conferring with Mr. Murphy to make sure my understanding is correct.
You can approach the bench. For a sidebar.
I apologize to my colleagues for this discussion, but in fact, this was not presented to me beforehand, so I am having to adjust on the fly a little bit here.
Hi, Mr. Larson, that's fine.
We good?
That same condition is in a second place, so we just need him to confirm that basically we're going to remove that same condition in both places.
All right. And would you just please, for the record, state that your concurrence in removing it in both places of the...
We're in agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we do have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
To that motion? Councilmember Taylor seconds the motion. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Councilmember Larson. All right, item Z14.
Z14, public hearing on zoning petition of PCCI Land Incorporated from GBL-L to GBL-L, located in the Southwest Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the council chamber who is opposed to this rezoning? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. I recognize Councilor Mundy.
I move for approval of one, the statement of consistency for the approval of this item, and two, W3558.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Councilor Clark.
This is where some apartments are being proposed. Will this interfere with that?
No, it's the same.
You're talking about the flats at Peters Creek. What this is effectively doing is changing the requirement for a side entrance and exit. So it's not the apartment zoning hasn't changed.
Okay.
It's just that access and egress on the side on Academy. Am I saying that correctly?
Correct. There's a current condition of approval that says that they can only have an emergency access onto Academy. And that was, this rezoning came through at a time when there were some improvements being made to the Academy and Peters Creek intersection. Since that time, those improvements have been completed. So with this request, Winston DOT has analyzed this request, and they are fine allowing a full access onto Academy as opposed to just an emergency access.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other comments? All right. And all those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Item Z15.
Item Z15, public hearing on zoning petition of Salem Congregation from C to GB-L. Property is located in the East Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the council chamber who is opposed to this rezoning? Mr. Dickey, no, it's not yours. All right, I will see no one. I'll declare the public hearing closed and would recognize Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, I move for approval of, one, the statement of consistency for the approval of this item, and 2, W3559.
Second.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Item Z16.
Item Z16, public hearing on zoning petition of LKSD Investments Incorporated from HB and HB-S to HB. Property is located in the Northwest Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the council chamber who is opposed to this rezoning? And this, I know Mr. Dickey is here for this one. All right, seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed and would recognize Councilmember McIntosh.
I move for approval of 1, the statement of consistency for the approval of this item, and 2, W-3560.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Not all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that is unanimous. Thank you. And item Z17.
Item Z17, public hearing on zoning petition of Constantinos Rizos and F. Fistrastarios Ferentinos from LB-S to HB-S. Property is located in the Southwest Ward. Planning Board recommends approval of petition.
Thank you. Jenny Mills signed up. Are you in opposition? Just to see, it's the proponents here tonight. Anyone from? Yes, would you like to open up with some comments, please? If you would state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Yes, my name is Robert Cash. I'm with CESO Civil Engineers for the project. I'm at 4601 Park Road, Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm the engineer of record, so if you have any questions about the project, I believe that we've been through all of the planning comments. We've complied with all of the requests and some of the concerns from the neighborhood. So if there's any questions, again, I'm here to answer those.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else for the proponents? All right, now for the opponents, Ms. Mills, if you would please state your name and address for the record as well.
Thank you. My name is Jenny Mills. I am at 4869 Willoughby Grove Road, Clemens. I also own and operate Full Life Counseling at 983 Mardon Drive, directly behind the property. Thank you, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and the council for hearing me. We purchased this property as Full Life Enterprises Full Life Investments in 2016 explicitly because we appreciated the need for a more private, more confidential access point for individuals coming to our office for counseling. We are a small family-owned business, and we appreciate the support for small family-owned businesses, including this restaurant. We do not oppose the reopening of the restaurant. In fact, we support it and encourage it. We also think we ought to be able to coexist without one business negatively impacting another. There's a difference between parking your car in a parking lot and going inside a restaurant compared to sitting in a drive-through, having no time to do anything but look out your window and see what's in front of you, which could be people coming in and out of a very confidential space for a very private service. And so for confidentiality purposes, for sound purposes, and security purposes of our building, after we are closed but the restaurant is still open, we oppose. I'm happy to answer any questions from the council.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. Is there anyone else for the opposition? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to add any rebuttal on that?
I guess the response is that we have already agreed to a buffer that would be replanted in that area that would put screening, as well as rebuilding the existing fence, which is in disrepair. And so between the fence and the buffer area, that will provide a visual separation between the businesses.
Mr. Mayor.
You have a question of his?
Some more information, please, about that existing fence. Is that a 6-foot opaque privacy fence, or exactly what is that fence that's fallen into disrepair?
Well, what will be a new one would be an opaque fence.
Okay.
It will not be a picket fence or something you can see through.
Is it 6 foot? That's what I'm concerned
I
about.
believe it is going to be 6 foot. Is that what we agreed to? I believe that is true. I think with the site plan.
What I'd like to do, Mr. Murphy, is include in the conditions that at least along that back wall or the back end of the parking lot, that we include a 6-foot privacy fence. I understand the need for privacy and a stigma associated with seeking treatment, and we don't want to do anything that would feed into that stigma. So I think a 6-foot privacy fence would really go far to ease those fears that Ms. Mills has about her clients.
Councilmember Mundy, I can, I'm not sure if I'm going to be giving a presentation in a second or not. I think I probably will be. What the engineer of record, he is correct. There is an existing 6-foot high opaque fence that wraps around what I will call the northeast edge of this property and wraps and comes down partially down the line between the subject property and the property that Ms. Mills spoke of, but it does not come all the way out to Mardon. It stops short. I do have some images that show that fence, and it does need to be repaired. But in order to address the concerns that Ms. Mills brought up, that fence would need to be continued down that whole line. If you do want a 6-foot opaque fence, it would need to be carried out towards Mardon, at least through where the parking area is.
We would not be opposed to that. And 6 foot would be absolutely agreeable.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for accepting that. All right.
Mayor, I've got a question for the gentleman. What type buffer yard is required?
It is going to be
And on top of that, can you explain what that means?
It's vegetative buffer. It's going to be, it'll have shrubs and it'll have high trees that will be played together. So you'll have a visual screening with vegetation as well as the fence as well.
All right, so what's the width of the buffer yard?
The buffer is going to be
17 feet.
About almost 18 feet.
Okay. And Mr. Murphy, there's the requirements for the density of those plantings.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to look in a couple different places.
There's 2 deciduous evergreen trees every 100 feet. There'll also be natural shrubs, a minimum of 18 inches high, spaced 18 inches tip to tip. Maximum of 30% would be deciduous. Existing trees would be accentuated. We wouldn't be tearing down existing trees to make this happen. So there are some 6 existing trees, 2 proposed Japanese maple trees. So there's lots of vegetation that's going to be proposed, as well as, of course, the fence. That will be along the entire, could be almost the northern and east side of the buildings.
Thank you.
That's your answer. Okay. Thank you, sir. Ms. Mills, would you like to offer anything on opposition, rebuttal?
Just briefly, sir.
You understand what the proposal is here?
So I think that it is important to recognize that the fence that he's referring to represents about 10 to 20% of the space that's affected. So the fence would need to come out pretty far. And so I would like the opportunity to express some comment at whoever is involved with that process as far as where the fence goes, because I don't want it to come out so far that people can't see our building either. So, it's sort of that dance of privacy and visibility at the same time.
All right, well, thank you. All right. I will close the public hearing, and Mr. Murphy, would you like to give us a report of the planning board, please.
Good evening again. Yes, this is a special use rezoning request from LBS to HBS there at the corner of Mardon and Jonestown Road. This is the subject property shown on the Legacy Growth Management Area Plan map in Growth Management Area 3 suburban neighborhoods. This is the subject property highlighted in yellow again on the corner of Mardon and Jonestown Road. This is the subject property. This is the piece of property that Ms. Mills just spoke on. This is the subject property outlined in yellow on the countywide, on the countywide aerial photo images. Again, you see it's a developed site. You see that there is an existing office building on the NOS to the southeast. This is a view north at the intersection of Jonestown and Mardon. This was originally built as a Boston market back in the late 80s, early 90s. It's most recently been an Oso Eats location, but it's been vacant for several years. This is the view northwest at East Wind Drive across Jonestown Road. This is looking southwest at the Mardon Drive entrance into the adjacent shopping center to the south. This is the view north at the existing entrance from Mardon Drive. This is the subject property. The property that Ms. Mills spoke of would be off the image to your right. You see in the background, far away, the existing fence that's there, and you'll be able to see it a little bit closer in the state of disrepair. This is looking south at the office building that Ms. Mills spoke of. And this is the existing fence, again, that is in a state of disrepair. This is looking northwest towards Jonestown Road. Again, this is on the subject property. This is the West Suburban Area Plan update, which was adopted by council in the late 2010s. It does recommend commercial for the subject property, and therefore the request is consistent with that. This is the site plan. You'll notice this is basically an existing developed site. This is the location of the fence in question, and it wraps, and it currently terminates approximately right here at the edge. I believe that's the transmission tower easement that traverses the property. So the fence currently ends approximately in this location, and what the site plan preparer, engineer of record, has indicated is that they are amenable to extending that fence across this line. And again, I'm sure that they would be willing to work with Ms. Mills as far as the distance.
Commensurate with the northern edge of her building is when everybody's good.
All right, so essentially what the Assistant City Manager King just told me is that they have discussed and they are fine with that fence terminating at the northern edge of her building. In other words, screening that parking lot where her clients would be getting in and out of their vehicles. As long as we have that screened, again, I believe that we can work together to make sure that we have addressed that. That would apparently address her concerns. In summary, the request is generally consistent with the goals of Legacy 2030. The West Suburban Area Plan Update proposed land use map recommends for the site commercial use. The proposal will reuse an existing vacant building for a use compatible and complementary with the surrounding development pattern. This was heard by the Planning Board at their January 12th, 2023 public hearing. There were no speakers in opposition, and the Planning Board did vote unanimously to recommend approval of this request to City Council. And I believe we already have on record the amended site plan element to extend that fence, and it's to be extended to align with the northern edge of Ms. Mills's building. So I believe, like I said, we have that on record. So with that, I'm glad to answer any other questions. I know we're kind of doing this on the fly, but.
Any questions, Mr. Murphy? Thank you very much. Councilor Mundy.
Do I need to mention those conditions in the?
Why don't you make your motion and say subject to the changes in the site plan as we've discussed?
I move for approval of, one, the consistency, statement of consistency for the approval of this item, and two, W3561 with the conditions that we've discussed this evening.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. That is unanimous. Thank you all very much, both sides there, for working out a on-the-fly zoning discussion here tonight. So now item Z18, please.
Z18, Mayor Joines' recommendations for reappointment to the Affordable Housing Coalition, Joseph Crocker and Paula McCoy, term expiring February 2025, and John Louder, term expiring February 2026.
Move for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Motion second. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, please indicate by voting no. The motion passes 7 in favor, 1 opposed. Councilmember Burke voting negative. Item Z19.
Z19, Mayor Joines' recommendations for appointment to the Affordable Housing Coalition, Sylvia C. Squire, term expiring February 2025.
Move for approval.
Second.
And second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And the motion passes 7 in favor, 1 opposed. Councilmember Burke voting no. Item Z20.
Z20, Mayor Joines' recommendations for appointment to the Citizens Police Review Board, Timbila Covington, term expiring April 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Item Z21.
Z21, Mayor Joines' recommendations for appointment to the Bicycle Pedestrian Active Mobility Advisory Committee, Brandon Hillis, term expiring 2025.
Move for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? Motion second. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. Anyone opposed, vote no. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Councilmember, as you know, we do have a need to go into closed session, and I'd like to recognize Councilmember Burke for a motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Winston-Salem City Council go into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3 to consult with and provide instructions to the city's legal staff regarding a legal matter and to preserve the attorney-client privilege.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please indicate by voting yes. To go into closed session, anyone opposed, vote no. Well, let's just say, everybody, all in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed, no. We'll go into closed session. Do it the old way.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Taylor to end closed session. All in favor of ending closed session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're back into open session now. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem to adjourn, seconded by Councilmember McIntosh. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.
Deal. Done.